And again, if we're reaching out to families or we're reaching out to parents, those things need to be talked about.
Everyone pays for the fire department, but not everyone needs a fire truck dousing their house down, right? What about AP programs, gifted programs? Do you think there's an equity problem in who gets access to these programs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the numbers, especially gifted programs, we don't see a lot of folks of color in there. A lot of parents aren't familiar with the differences between honors and APs and general ed programs. And so they aren't always privy to those conversations.
You shouldn't be acting like this. You're an honors kid, right? And it's like, but what's the difference between the honors? It was a label we put on this kid, and all of a sudden that's the expected behavior. And so like Dr. Sheldon Eakins has spent 15 years inside the education system as a teacher, principal, and special ed director. And he's here to tell you why schools your kids attend might be unintentionally working against them, not academically, culturally. And if you've never thought about that distinction, this conversation is going to open your eyes. Welcome back to the Supported Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Sebastian. We spent a lot of time on this show talking about how to win the college game, AP scores, admission strategy, saving money. But today we're going to go upstream, because none of that matters if a student doesn't feel like they belong in the classroom they're sitting in. That's why I brought Dr. Sheldon Eakins onto the show. Sheldon is the author of Leading Equity, Meaningful Classroom Management, and What Are You Bringing to the Potluck? He is the founder of Purposeful Teaching Academy, host of the Leading Equity podcast, and former teacher, principal, and director of special education. Dr. Sheldon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So just kind of give us the quick version of who you are, what's the core problem, and what you're trying to solve in education.
So who am I? I am a father first, always a father first.
There you go.
I am also an author and educator. Like, I hate to use, everybody always says a lifelong learner, but it is what it is. I mean, I am always been one of those people that would like to learn a little bit about everything. So if there's something that I come across that I don't know anything about, I'm going to do a little bit of research. It's a lot helpful now with AI and ChatGPT and Gemini, all these different products that I could utilize and quick search beyond just a Google chat or a Google search. But that's me in a nutshell. Currently, I supervise a behavior support program here in South Phoenix. I enjoy what I do. I have a great staff and a great team that I work with, and the students, of course, are amazing. So when it comes to like, what am I trying to solve? That's a good question, because the population of students that I work with right now have been labeled all kind of things, ADHD, autistic, ODD, all these different labels that are placed on students. And when you get to know them, you're like, yo, you're a pretty cool kid. You know, you have a story, of course, but what I want to see is us to find a way to remove those labels and just know them as Billy, just know them as Mary, Nancy, whoever, and not worry so much or hone in so much on the labels.
Well, that's America, right? We love our labels, and we put everyone into boxes. That's why I said, like, you know how Japan solved free and reduced lunch?
How?
They gave everyone free and reduced lunch. They gave everyone lunch. That's how they solved it. They didn't need to say, well, we got these kids. Yeah. Everyone gets one.
Yeah.
But it kind of brings
people. It would be amazing. It would be amazing.
Well, we had a little glimpse of it during COVID. Some schools haven't gone. Some schools still provide free breakfast, and for my kids' school still provides free lunch. But it's just like, no, we're taking that back now. You can pay your $3.25, right? And get your slop. So, but it kind of brings us into something I really want to kind of dive into, because equity and equality get thrown around a lot and used incorrectly. And we have now seen, not to get super uber political, but we have seen the pendulum swing from one side or the other, from equity initiatives all the way back to, no, we can't be fair. That just life sucks. Just deal with it. So equity is a word that gets thrown around a lot. Yeah. And I think a lot of parents hear it and either tune out or get confused. In the simplest terms, what does equity mean in the classroom and in the scope of education?
I will give you as simple as I can make this. All right. Let's say I was a history teacher. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. So we're speaking of language. You understand? So let's say I want to plan a field trip to go to the local museum. right? And I got 10 kids that are in my classroom. I know that's not realistic. We don't have 10 kids these days in our classroom. So, but just for the sake of the argument, I got 10 students that I'm trying to take on a field trip. Now, I do the research ahead of time and find out, okay, in order for us to get the bus, in order for us to get, lunch, whatever it is, the admission is going to cost about $10 per student to go. So if I say everybody, parents, permission slips, everybody bring in $10 tomorrow for this field trip, that's equality. Everybody has to pay the exact same thing. However, there may be some students that absolutely do not need that $10 to pay. They could easily they could pay not only their way, but they could pay someone else's way. So maybe they have $20 that they could bring to the table, which could help someone else out. Maybe someone only needs $5. Maybe somebody only needs $1. So there's different levels in which all the students can go and participate in this field trip, but they don't all necessarily have to bring $10 in order to make this even out. So if it's $100 that you're trying to collect, and you can collect that $100 across those 10 students, however you collect it, but you still end up with $100, that's the equity piece. That's the part where you're saying, I'm going to look at what are the individual needs of each student that are in my classroom, all 10 students, and look at their individual needs. What is it going to take for them to get on this bus tomorrow? That is the equitable piece. But sometimes, like you said, we confuse everything and just say, oh, let's just charge everybody $10. It's so much easier if we do everything the same, or we make it equal. This person pays 10, this person pays 10, this person pays 10. But again, that's not maybe what is needed in that situation.
And you talk about 3 types of people when it comes to equity: bystanders, advocates, and brokers. Walk us through that. Where do most educators and parents fall?
So, well, that's a hard question, because my audience, a lot of them are advocates. So I even say, advocacy, because to me, advocacy is the part where I recognize that there are challenges. I recognize that things aren't fair in a lot of situations, or there might be another voice that's needed. And so I'm willing to utilize whatever status I have, whatever background or experiences that I have, and use my voice to support others. Okay, that's the advocacy piece. The bystander side of things is where, I might recognize something, but I'm not going to say anything for whatever reason. It doesn't make you necessarily a bad person, but sometimes people feel like, if I say something, my job could be in jeopardy. Or one of these days I want to get a promotion, or I want to get from here to there. And if I say something in this scheme and whatever's happening in our educational system, this could hurt me. And so as a result, I'm not going to say anything. That's the bystander side. From the broker side of things is, I have a connection. I have a large network maybe, and I can connect you with this person to get you what you need in order to get to the places that you need to go. That's the broker side of things. I tend to fall within the audience. I tend to fall within the advocacy side of things. I do have a network. I've had a podcast for about 6 years. And so I know people based off of the guests that I've had on. So I do have a little bit of that broker side of things. However, I tend to be more in their advocacy piece.
So what was the moment that made equity your life's work?
Yeah. It's funny because I didn't necessarily know what equity was going through. I went to a college and then got my teacher prep program and everything. And so I thought I knew everything. But once it hits home, like when you go beyond the theoretical side of things and like you're living these experiences, I had an instance where fresh out of college, I had the opportunity to go overseas and teach in the Virgin Islands. And that was just an amazing time. I met an amazing group of people and the culture, community, everything. So I blend in until I start talking. When I started talking, people realized, wait a second, you're not from here. And so I had a moment where I didn't learn the customs and culture. I'm from Texas originally. So I came over there and people say, hey, good morning to me, or good afternoon, good evening. And I would just say, hey, what's up? What's good? How y'all doing? And I really thought I was cool. I thought I was like the cool, fresh out of college teacher. But then I had someone pull me to the side and just told me, look, man, we don't like you. You're being very rude. And I didn't understand what am I doing? Because I'm like, I'm being nice. You said good morning. I said, hey, what's up? And they said, see, That's the issue. If someone says good morning to you, you say good morning back to us. If someone says well, good evening, whatever time of day it is, you say it back. Otherwise, when you're saying what's up, they're like, why are you talking to us like this? Why? What are you saying? What's up? Like, they're saying good morning. We expect you to say good morning back.
Right.
I didn't have a framework, or this wasn't taught to me in my teacher class about learning the customs and about learning the community and culture that I'm serving. I didn't learn that. At least I didn't have the label for it. And that was that first moment early on when I first started in education. That was almost 20 years ago. But I've always subscribed to the idea of, yes, I could read a book. Yes, I could watch a video. Yes, I could learn whatever I want to learn. But I had to find the specific needs that are relevant to the students that I'm serving, to the families that I'm serving, to the language that is being presented. I need to learn those things. Otherwise, I'm just providing a blanketed educational process or program that is not catering to the needs of our students.
So if equity is about making sure every kid gets what they need, what are schools actually getting wrong?
I think it goes back to the equality piece, and it's hard. Equity is harder than equality in my mind, right? Because if I can get everybody the same thing, like you said, Japanese and free reduced lunch, yeah, give everybody this free and reduced lunch. That makes sense. It's easier to just do it that way. Yeah, sure, there's funding and economics and finance, all that plays a role. But like here, like you had to qualify for free and reduced lunch because, again, going back, some students may not need that free and reduced lunch. Some might need just a free lunch. Some might need a reduced lunch. Some might be able to bring their own lunch. Mom or dad or whoever can package their Lunchables or whatever and bring it to school. So I think when we spend so much time on the equality piece, that's where things can change. But again, we have to pay attention to the individual needs that students have.
Everyone pays for the fire department, but not everyone needs a fire truck dousing their house down, right? But when your house is on fire, you definitely need the fire department.
When I call, I need to have them show up, right? Same with car insurance, right? We pay every month for our car insurance to keep our car just in case something happens. But again, I feel like a lot of schools, and I'm a person that operates on educators have the best intentions. School policies have the best intentions until you prove me otherwise. So I feel like there's a lot of room for growth. Even when COVID was happening, I was like, okay, this is an opportunity. We're going to make some changes now. But eventually things started to go right back to where they initially were. And the obvious, at the end of the day, our school systems mimic, and I wrote about this in my first book. They come back from our, industrial revolution days. And it just hasn't really changed from that system, which isn't applicable in 2026.
So you wrote Meaningful Classroom Management, and the core argument in that classroom management is that classroom management shouldn't be about the rules and compliance. It should be about culture and community. What's the difference, and why does that matter?
So I was one of those, and I've done this myself, early teaching days, where, you spend so much time on compliance. This is how you're supposed to stand. This is how you're supposed to raise your hand. This is how you feel. And I get there should be some structure and order. However, often what happens in these type of situations is it's teacher focused. It's what a teacher expects of a student as what their ideal student should look like. And there's not any real accountability or buy-in from the student themselves. So what I talk about in that book is the idea of creating a community where, what would make you feel like you belong in this classroom? What are some expectations that you would like to have in the classroom? And what would you expect to do if one of those things that you would like are broken, right? Whatever protocol, whatever we come up with as a group. And this is something that we can sign. We could keep it on the wall in front. That is a process where we're providing opportunities for students to have that buy-in that isn't already in place before they even show up on the first day of school. Like often teachers already have the rules. Do this, do that. This is how. Cross your fingers for to use the bathroom. All these things that we typically do, which is universal in a lot of sense. However, these are created by teachers and not created by the students. And so I like to try to shift our narrative from the teachers first, or from teachers' rules first, but to the students buy-in and rules first. And that's something that we create as a community.
So I work with a lot of like high achieving students, a lot of affluent families looking to go to top schools, competitiveness, taking a lot of AP courses, and they might think equity doesn't apply to us. What would you say to them?
You just described it. Equity doesn't. You said affluent neighborhoods and what else?
Well, I get affluent neighborhoods. I get a lot of I got first gen immigrant families as well.
Yeah.
But they just think equity doesn't apply to us. What would you say to that?
I would like to, so those kind of questions, I like to ask more questions because I remember I had a conversation with a principal and I did a workshop on bias and I did one on, it was equity related and she said, this is great information, but this kind of like what you said, this doesn't apply to our students. Or they said something like, well, we only have a handful of kids in our class that this will maybe be applicable to. But the rest of our community, 98% of our students are probably not going to fall within this category. And I always respond with, but how many did you need? Like at what point, if you got 100 kids and 98 of them are coming from the affluent and quote unquote don't need equity, and you only have the two, is that not enough? Do you not care about those two students? Like, if we're thinking about what is the best for all students, I think we can all agree, no matter what side of the political side of life you're on, we can all agree that we want our students to succeed. And if it requires two students or requires an extra hour for this student, or if it requires an extra worksheet for another student, then those are things that I feel are important. We shouldn't put a number or a percentage on what qualifies as to when we put focus on students that are in additional needs. So yes, it's great that you have a high percentage of students that may not need extra time or may not need extra resources, whatever that might look like. But at the end of the day, all students are not the same. And there's going to be some shifts that's going to need to take place in order for everyone to succeed. So the idea that there is no equity needed, again, I think that's a misunderstanding of what the definition of equity is. And that can go back to what we were talking about initially with my example in the field trip.
What about AP programs, gifted programs? Do you think there's an equity problem in who gets access to these programs?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the numbers, especially gifted programs, we don't see a lot of folks of color in there. Gifted programs are often gatekeeper programs. It's and even AP, I would argue. Some teachers will say, hey, I'm teaching this AP class, and they will personally invite students to enroll in their class for next semester, next quarter, whatever it is. But they may not ask all students or invite all students. A lot of parents aren't familiar with the differences between honors and APs and general ed programs. And so they aren't always privy to those conversations. And again, if we're reaching out to families or we're reaching out to parents, those things need to be talked about. Some students come from homes that are, parents are educated to a certain level. Maybe they have higher ed, maybe they have postdoc, whatever it is. And so they might be familiar with this AP language. They might be familiar with honors classes or gifted programs. They might actually be seeking these things, while there's another subset of group of students that aren't as familiar. But if you just told them about it, or if they had just knew a little bit more, they would understand the importance of being able to take these kind of classes. We can even talk about how AP classes aren't always offered in every single school, right? So certain rural schools may not have access to dual enrollments. They may not have access to gifted programs. So these are things that we see are unequal in a lot of ways. And there's definitely a lot of equity issues there.
Well, I would agree as well. And it ranges from state to state, from school to school. But you actually talk about how schools ask diverse students how to assimilate rather than belong. That's the potluck metaphor. Break that down for us.
So it's funny because my original title that I wanted to have for this book was Don't Bring Boxed Macaroni to the Potluck. Because here's the thing. When we think about a potluck, somebody brings in this dish, somebody brings in that dish, somebody brings in another dish. And I've been a person that has always enjoyed potlucks. And however, sometimes there's dishes that that someone brings that may not get touched or is barely eaten as opposed to the other dishes out there. Well, those who are listening, I want them to follow me because sometimes people get stuck on the whole box macaroni and they'll say, well, I like box macaroni. And sometimes that's all I have to do. I want folks to stay with me on this one here. Okay. But if we bring something to the potluck and it's box macaroni, it's often fast, something quick. It's not a lot of intentionality when it comes to the meal itself, right? You just warm up some water, boil some water, put some noodles in for a few, and then mix the powder at the end. That's not the type of approach that we want to have when it comes to education, right? We want to bring our best dish, okay? We want to bring in something that we can quote unquote put our foot in. And if that's not something that we're not bringing the best for our students. So this book that I wrote is for school leaders, because at the end of the day, your school leader is your chief equity officer. If they have a lot of the access to the finances when it comes to professional development, when it comes to who you're hiring, there's a lot of control and a lot of emphasis that is placed on the school leader or administration as a whole. And that's why I always recommend that whenever you're bringing something to the quote unquote table, you are bringing your best. Not something that is a quick rush. Oh, shoot, we have potluck tomorrow. Let me hurry up and do something real quick. No, we were very intentional. We got the ingredients, we cooked it from scratch, whatever it is, but we're really putting a lot of emphasis into it.
I like that. It is interesting because did you teach in Texas primarily, or did you teach in Arizona?
I taught in a few places. I've taught in Virgin Islands. And then I did a little time in Louisiana, Oregon, and then Idaho, and then now I'm in Phoenix.
And so, I've taught in probably virtually every setting. I've taught in the South in North Carolina. It was a military school, military families, black, white families, not a ton of other. Outside diversity. I've taught in very rural schools, taught in a special education school, taught in suburbs, taught internationally too. A student taught Budapest, but my longest tenure was in Fairfax County, Virginia, and we were actually a majority minority school. We didn't have a majority, so it was like we had 55 different nationalities represented. And it was so diverse. It was crazy. Like to meet kids from all over the world was really, really cool. But in terms of that, like assimilation, that metaphor that you talk about, it just never, it seemed like kids were just kids in that school. At least from my perspective, the classroom, it was not like, it's the only place in the world that you could literally have a kid from an Indian family and a kid from a Pakistani family sit next to each other and be best friends. And there's no animosity. You know what I'm saying? Like they're just teenagers in this school area, and this has happened to be, which is which I think is like what I think is the best of America. But when it comes to I've taught in inner city DC charter school, and it's funny because that was a 99.9% African American population. But when we going back to that original thing about labels, we had kids on different tracks. And I literally heard it, and I caught myself at one point where I'm like, is that what it just comes down to? Is like, you shouldn't be acting like this. You're an honors kid. Right. And it's like, but what's the difference between the honors? It was a label we put on this kid, and all of a sudden that's the expected behavior. And to the equality side, why are we not just saying like you said, all these kids could be high achieving. They all have the ability to learn and grow. And I think the system of education kind of pushes us into fixed mindsets and into those boxes.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that, because going back to the program that I work in, and again, these are all students that have IEPs that have a behavior issue. And so a lot of times the label of my students at the school is they have issues with learning because of their behavior. What they don't know is I have several students that actually qualify for a gifted program. And the reason why they're not in a gifted program is because of this behavior challenges that they have. But some of those behavior challenges that they may have might be because they were just bored in the general ed population. But when they tested as a gift, at the gifted level. So there's a lot more to the story then you just see numbers or just statistics. Anytime you do whatever research or data that you're getting, it needs to be quantitative and qualitative information, and not just from one side or the other. So yeah, it's, if we were to operate on, like you said, yes, you might take this class or you might be acting this way, but our biases start to kick in, and kind of like what you said, oh, well, you're supposed to not act this way because you're from this household, or you're from this neighborhood, or you have this honor class, or you. There's always a reason why we believe somebody shouldn't act a certain way based off of stereotype or whatever biases that we have created. And I've done this too. I'm not just saying it as I
well, we all, yeah,
I do, and that's something that I work on as well. And anytime I get, people call me out like, Sheldon, you're being biased, or that's a stereotype, whatever it is, and I say, you know what, you're right, because as a human being that does training, that does workshops and things like this all the time, I still am a human being at the end of the day. That's what I was saying, Doc, that I tend to try to lean on people have the best intentions until you prove me otherwise. Because at the end of the day, I can't read anybody's minds, and I can only go by actions that I'm seeing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we all can have our own biases, and part of that, growing up where we grow up with limited exposure or a lot of exposure to what other people, other cultures. But it kind of comes down to it's crazy. You've probably seen it as a special education director. Is school to school, is the populations can be different in terms of advocacy. You have a more affluent, more knowledgeable population, more litigious, knows how to navigate the system for their kids to get all the resources and maybe even beyond what is necessary to provide a free and appropriate public education. And then you got kids that might not be as literate in the policies and procedures of IDEA, that maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally, the school doesn't provide all those opportunities. As a system, how do we fix education's equity access for our students?
It's going to require a lot of advocacy work, and it's going to take some of those affluent folks, for example, maybe supporting other folks. So that's the advocacy piece. So let's say I am an individual who is privy to legalities and has a better understanding of what's out there and what resources. It's funny because I just interviewed someone on Sunday about something similar, this topic, and she mentioned how she ran a program for her district where she had a couple schools, students from each school, and they basically visited each other's school. And the disproportionality between the resources that were available at one school versus the resources that were available at the other school. However, the students that were at the school that was well resourced, they were like, this is not fair. Like, we have so much more at our school. Y'all should have the same things that we have. Y'all should have access to the same amount of resources, all the technology that we have. Like, how come y'all don't have it? And so she worked with these groups of students, and they basically wrote letters to their clergy, not their clergy, to the Congress folks. And eventually they got a law passed, a new bill that was pushed. This is in Chicago, in Illinois. And they got a new law that was passed where they could, I don't have it in front of me, but it was basically the distribution of the educational funding was more on an equitable standpoint. So that didn't happen overnight. She said it was about 9 years of work, but it's something that she recently published. It's something that I see can work. The problem is we have to stay at it. So you're going to hit some walls. You're going to hit, some no's, and you're going to get pushback. But if you stick into it and you stay with it, and you have, again, voices, especially voices that are coming from the side that might be more affluent or might have more resources, if they're supporting as well, that can make such a difference.
So speaking of the pushback, right? We could play devil's advocate and say teachers might say, I treat all my students the same. That is fair. Why is that an actual problem?
That's not true. We don't treat all our kids the same. I'm just saying, like, we're human beings. We're human beings. Like you've been in education. You were a history teacher. You never had a student come up to you and ask you who's your favorite teacher, or sorry, who's your favorite student, and you say, "Oh no, I don't have a favorite. We're all my favorite, right?" If you say you got kids, right? They're all your favorite kids. Okay, so at the end of the day, the reality of it is you don't treat all your students the same. And honestly, I don't want you to treat all your kids the same, because again, that's an equality situation.
Yeah.
Okay. If I treat all of my kids the same, I'm giving them all the exact same things. However, if I'm intentional with what I'm doing, I am paying attention to Johnny's needs. If I treat Johnny the same way I treat David, that's going to be an issue. But if I say, okay, Johnny needs this, David needs this, I'm not treating both of them the same. So I don't want you to treat them the same. I want you to pay attention to their individual needs and make sure that their individual needs are met. If David needs extra time, if Johnny has an IEP and his IEP say these are the goals that Johnny needs, that's what I want you to pay attention to. And those are the things that I want you to support Johnny with. And the other things are the things I want you to support David with. You have to differentiate your instruction. You cannot say I treat all my kids the same, but I differentiate at the same. Like those don't even go together. It doesn't go together.
You are also an edupreneur. I think that's an entrepreneur. That's an education. So you build a podcast, a consulting business. You've written books. What have you learned about taking this message outside the traditional system?
I enjoy it. I'm always learning. I'm a person that I don't believe I know everything. Every now and then I come across something that I'd never thought about, never knew existed. My goal in any of my trainings and work that I do is not to be a gotcha, not to make anybody feel bad or guilty for who they are. It's just more of bringing perspectives and thoughts that they may not have thought about, because as you mentioned earlier, we tend to have our view of the world based off of maybe where we grew up, our social circles, things we watch on TV, things we read in newspapers, right? Those tend to shape our view of the world. And so I can't personally speak of the challenges that women might have, because those aren't lived experiences that I'll ever have. There's other areas in life that I just will not be able to experience, but I could try my best to try to empathize with them. And that's what the community that I kind of try to create anytime I bring in workshops or any type of work that I do as an edupreneur. It's just to try to get people together, try to think about things that maybe you didn't think about. And again, I assume that you had the best intentions, but there's some things that you might want to consider that you may not have thought about.
Love it. Can we move into lightning round as we wrap this up here?
Good.
So this is like 5 questions. This first thing that comes to mind, but no need for explanation. All right. All right, Dr. Sheldon. One book every educator should read.
Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students.
There you go. Worst advice you hear given to teachers right now?
Anything related to getting caught up. I'm going to give you some time in your classrooms to get caught up. There's no such thing as getting caught up. There's always more to do.
One thing parents overthink about their kids' school experience.
Right now it's homework. Parents wonder why there's not homework, or wonder why there's too much homework.
If you could change one policy in every school in America tomorrow, what would it be?
I would get rid of uniforms.
Okay. What's the? Does your school have uniforms?
Let them come as we have uniforms, but we're not sticklers. Like you can show up. I mean, as long as it's just not out of If you had the general gist of the uniform, it's acceptable.
What about what's the next big shift coming in education?
I think we're going to put more emphasis on AI as far as how it's being utilized. We still have educators that are have all kinds of trepidations behind AI and cheating and all this. I think it's going to be embraced at some point rather soon.
Got it. Well, Dr. Sheldon, this has been awesome. Appreciate your time coming on. Absolutely. For those people listening that want to find out more about everything that is to know about you, where can they find you?
They can go to my website, purposeful247.com. They can also follow me on Instagram at Sheldon Eakins, and that's Eakins.
All right.
Probably the easiest way to find
put all those links in the show notes and in the description below. So, Dr. Sheldon, thank you again for coming on, and thank you for listening to the Supported Learning Podcast. See you next time.